I'm married, she said, laughing, then added, but it's complicated. I heard it all, word for word, 10 feet away. My hand was still holding the cup I brought her. She didn't know I had come upstairs. She didn't see me standing behind the fake fern by the glass divider. And she didn't realize her voice carried straight into the hallway when she said, "Let's not talk about him right now. I don't want to ruin my lunch." Him. That was me. I was him. She was sitting across from some guy in a charcoal jacket, stirring her tea like she was on a casual first date. She touched her hair. She tilted her head. Those gestures I thought were just for me. Those weren't just instincts. They were patterns. Rehearsed. Practiced. Sharpened. I should have left right then. But instead, I walked in. I didn't say a word. I just placed her phone, my phone, technically on the table, the screen still lit up from the tracking app I'd installed 2 weeks ago. She looked at me like I was a glitch in the simulation, like her brain had skipped a frame. "Morris," she blinked. What are you doing here?" "I brought you coffee," I said, and in answer to the question you never thought I'd ask. She reached for the phone before she even touched the cup. And that's when I knew. She hadn't forgotten she was married. She'd just started pretending I didn't exist. The way her hand flew to that phone, faster than toward the drink I brought, faster than toward me, said everything. Her fingers gripped it so tight her knuckles paled. Her date, or co-worker, or whoever the hell he was looked confused, glancing at me like I was a delivery guy who had walked into the wrong room. "This is she hesitated. Not even joking. She looked at me, then him, and actually stalled. I watched her mentally scroll through possible titles. Friend? Brother? Ex? Husband? "My husband," she finally said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. But it was too late. The air had already shifted. The man's shoulders stiffened. His eyes went from amused to calculating. She wasn't just caught, she was cornered by reality. And me? I just stood there, watching the two of them sit across a table I was never supposed to see. I pulled out a chair. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just slowly, like someone finally deciding to sit down and listen instead of endlessly hoping. "Please," I said, "don't stop on my account." Nadine's smile cracked at the corners, but she tried to keep it up. "Babe, this isn't what it looks like." I blinked. I actually blinked. That phrase. That stupid, useless phrase. People always say it like it means anything anymore. "No," I said, "because it looks like you've been meeting him during your lunch breaks for at least 3 weeks. Unless you laugh like that with all your coworkers." The man, he still hadn't said a word, finally leaned back. He looked uncomfortable, which I appreciated. At least one of us had the decency to feel something. "Listen, I didn't know," he started. I held up a hand. "Not interested in your part. You're not married to me." He went quiet again. Nadine looked like she was trying to solve an invisible math problem on the wall behind me. "I was going to tell you," she finally said. "When?" "After dessert." Silence. I wasn't sure what I wanted, she muttered, eyes fixed on the untouched drink between us. I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "That's fair. I was just the guy who paid off your car and sat through your mother's 3-hour birthday brunch." I don't know what hit harder, her silence, or the way the guy next to her started pushing his chair back without even pretending to offer her support. He mumbled something about giving us space, then disappeared faster than he arrived. Good. She stared at the phone in her hand like it had betrayed her, not the other way around. "Did you track me?" I laughed. I actually laughed, bitter and low. "You think that's the worst thing in this room right now?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I stood up. "I didn't come here to catch you, Nadine. I came here because I thought bringing you a drink might remind you that someone still cared." I started to walk away, but then I turned back. "And for what it's worth, I didn't need to track you. You've been gone for months." I just finally caught up. I walked out before she could respond. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if she was crying or texting or already explaining things away to the next guy on her contact list. But as I got into my car, I realized something. I had no plan. No confrontation speech. No bags packed. No divorce papers. I had only the truth now, and that truth was heavier than I thought it would be. And I wasn't even close to done unpacking it. The drive home felt like driving through someone else's memory. Everything looked familiar. Same potholes, same gas station sign blinking half-dead near the corner, but none of it felt like mine anymore. I don't even remember pulling into the driveway. I sat there in the car for 10, maybe 15 minutes, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the window where Nadine usually kept a little succulent that I bought her for our anniversary last year. It was dead now. Just a cracked pot with dried-out soil and a stub of something that had once been alive. Like us. The strangest part? The silence. That god-awful silence. I opened the door, walked in, and all I could hear was the hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock that Nadine insisted we hang in the hallway. I dropped my keys into the dish by the door, the one we bought at a flea market on that road trip through Michigan. Every item in that house had a story, but now they all felt like props on a stage after the actors had left. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and just stood there, staring at a half-empty bottle of her oat milk and a container of pasta I made 2 nights ago that she never touched. My own dinner had been eaten alone in the garage, while she claimed she had to work late. I remember texting her that night. I saved you a plate. Microwave's clean. She didn't respond until 11:47 p.m. with a thumbs-up emoji, and I had thanked her for replying. That was the version of me I hated the most. The version that kept shrinking smaller and smaller just to fit into whatever space she left behind. I found myself walking around the house aimlessly, like I was searching for something I'd lost. I ended up in the bedroom. Her side of the bed was unmade. Mine was still tucked in tight. There was a coffee-stained mug on her nightstand, one I hadn't seen before. New, probably from her office. I picked it up out of instinct. There was lipstick on the rim. I'm not even sure why that detail bothered me so much. Maybe because she hadn't worn lipstick around me in months. Maybe because she used to always wipe it off before kissing me. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer of her nightstand. I wasn't snooping. I was searching for proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined her growing colder, that I hadn't invented the distance. And I found it. Not the cliché kind of proof, not a love letter or a hotel keycard. No, I found a folded receipt from a fancy restaurant neither of us had ever been to, dated exactly 2 weeks ago. 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine, and the reservation was under Nadine T. She told me she had food poisoning that night. She'd texted me from the bathroom, she said. Can't talk, feel awful. I had left crackers outside the door and made her peppermint tea. I suddenly felt the urge to laugh, but it came out like a cough. I sat there holding that receipt like it was a funeral notice for the life I thought we had. Every memory began unraveling in my head. Every canceled dinner, every early bedtime, every turned shoulder. She wasn't pulling away. She had already let go. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Weaker. I looked like someone who got cheated on and still offered to make breakfast the next morning. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Nadine. I'm sorry. Please don't do anything rash. I'll explain everything when I get home. Home. She still called it home. As if that word meant anything now. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in over a year. Our refinancing paperwork. Her signature was all over it. Mortgage, insurance, power of attorney. I stared at the lines she signed with such confidence. And that's when a thought started forming, slow at first, but growing louder by the second. She didn't just betray me emotionally. She might have financially set me up to lose everything. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of a very strategic unraveling. And I had to decide if I was going to keep playing the fool or finally become someone she wouldn't see coming. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I lay on the couch in the living room, fully dressed, just staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly like it was counting down something I didn't understand. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, full of shadows that whispered what I'd ignored. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. How she'd looked at me in that cafe, like she was scrambling to remember who I was. It was a look that breaks something inside you. Quietly. Permanently. By morning, I had made a decision, not out of anger, but something colder. I needed answers. Real ones. Not texts. Not half apologies. I needed to know how far this had gone. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened her home office door. Nadine had always been territorial about that room. She called it her zone, and I respected that, stupidly, as it turns out. But that morning, I walked in like I paid rent there. Because I did. I'd furnished the damn thing. I'd assembled the bookshelves while she sipped wine and criticized the instructions. The first thing I noticed was the wall calendar. It was flipped to the wrong month. May. But it was July. Strange detail, but in May, there were several dates circled in pink marker. A Thursday, 2 Mondays, a Friday. I looked closer. Tiny hearts drawn beside the circles. She never marked our anniversary, not even birthdays. But hearts? I started checking drawers. Nothing suspicious at first, just the usual stuff. Notebooks, pens, expired coupons. But then I pulled on the corner of a heavy book leaning too far forward on the shelf and something fell behind it. I reached back and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. My name was written on it. My heart nearly stopped. The handwriting was hers. There was no stamp, no return address, just Morris written in black ink. I stared at it for a full minute before I opened it. Inside were 4 things. A printed email chain between Nadine and someone named T. Dalton discussing a potential transition plan that involved selling our house. A printed screenshot of a bank account I didn't recognize, with a balance nearly twice what we had in our joint savings. A typed resignation letter she never submitted, but addressed to a different company than the one she told me she worked for. A blank legal form titled, Quitclaim Deed, Spouse to Sole Owner. I felt physically sick. She was preparing for something. She was planning a future that didn't involve me. And then I noticed the address on the email. It wasn't her home address. It was an office. I Googled it. Dalton and Finch. A law firm. Not hers. His. So I drove. I didn't even think. I just grabbed the envelope, threw on my jacket, and headed out the door like I was chasing the final pages of a novel written behind my back. The office was downtown, tucked between a dental practice and a craft beer bar. I walked in and told the receptionist I had an appointment with Thomas Dalton. She looked me up and down, hesitated, then asked if I had paperwork. I handed her the envelope. She glanced inside, then her face changed. "One moment," she said, disappearing behind a frosted glass door. A few minutes later, a man in his 40s came out. Confident, tanned, Rolex. He extended a hand. "Morris, is it?" he said. "Come in." I sat down in his office surrounded by shelves of expensive-looking books and art that probably cost more than my car. He leaned back in his chair like this wasn't new to him at all. "I assume you figured out most of it," he said. "Not enough," I replied. He nodded slowly. "I represent Nadine in several matters. Legally and personally." That word, personally, hit like a slap. I didn't respond. I just let him keep talking. "She asked me to hold on to some paperwork," he said. "In the event that you," how did she phrase it, "started digging?" I stared at him. "You're her lawyer?" "Technically, I'm her former attorney now." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He smirked. "Because personal and professional started to overlap in a way that violated policy. She's no longer a client." There it was. No hiding. No coded language. She hadn't just betrayed me with some guy at work. She had planned to dissolve our marriage with a man who once represented her legally, and then, presumably, began representing her in other ways. And she was 2 steps ahead the entire time. I left his office with a migraine forming behind my eyes and a strange sense of calm in my chest. Not peace. Not acceptance. Just clarity. A part of me that had been asleep for years had finally woken up. Because I now understood something that changed everything. Nadine wasn't just cheating on me emotionally or physically. She was restructuring her entire life behind my back, removing me like a placeholder in her own personal rebrand. But if she thought I was just going to quietly hand her the pen to sign me out, she didn't know me at all. By the time I pulled into the driveway again, the sky was starting to dim. The house looked different to me now. Not in the way a place changes over time, but in the way you realize a photo you once loved was always missing something. You just didn't notice until it was too late. I sat there for a few moments, watching our porch light flicker like it couldn't make up its mind whether to stay on or not. It reminded me of Nadine. Faint, fading, flickering, unreliable. I walked up the front steps, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't use my key. I didn't have to. I had already changed the locks 2 hours earlier. I called the locksmith right after leaving the law office. Told him it was urgent. He didn't ask questions. I watched him drill through the deadbolt while sipping the same cold coffee I had bought her. That felt symbolic. Like the lock was the last part of the illusion, and once it was gone, so was any pretense of a shared life. Inside, I didn't bother turning on lights. I moved through the dark house like it owed me answers. And it did. I went back to her office, but not for receipts or secrets in drawers this time. I went for the device that would tell me what she really cared about, her laptop. She never left it at work. Claimed she liked to finish projects from home. I always thought that was dedication. Now I realized it was strategy. I opened it. Password screen. I didn't know it. Or rather, I thought I didn't. I tried Junebug 101. Wrong. I tried wedding date. Wrong again. Then I paused. Thought about the way she always told people she hated being predictable. I typed in something I never expected her to use. Untethered. It unlocked. My hands literally started shaking. That was a word I'd heard her use before, offhandedly, in a podcast she listened to once about emotional reinvention. She had laughed when the host said it. Imagine being so tied down to one person for life, she'd muttered. I had chuckled nervously, not realizing it was a warning shot. The desktop was clean. Too clean. But her browser history wasn't. That's where the real wreckage began. There were searches, dates, legal blogs, relocation forums. A folder labeled Next Steps on her desktop. Inside were spreadsheets. One titled Q3 Personal Transition. It listed estimated costs for separating assets. Notes on splitting utilities. She'd even itemized our furniture with color-coded tabs. Green for keep, red for sell, yellow for donate. My name wasn't mentioned once. I opened another file. This one was worse. It was a letter, dated 3 weeks ago, titled, To Morris, When the Time Comes. I didn't want to read it, but I did. By the time you read this, you'll know I've moved forward with my decision. I know you'll say I blindsided you, but we've been disconnected for a long time. I felt more like your caretaker than your partner. I need something more. You'll survive, you always do. I sat back in the chair, stunned. Caretaker? Is that what she thought this was? That I made dinner, paid bills, rubbed her back on bad days because I thought she was fragile? No. I did it because I loved her. Because I believed in what we had. Because I thought one day she'd look at me the way she used to, like I was something rare. Instead, she saw me as an obligation she was waiting to escape. I kept reading. The letter went on for 2 pages. Cold. Detached. Almost smug in its self-justification. The worst part? She had written it like I'd never see her again. As if I'd disappear quietly once she moved forward. I closed the laptop. I didn't throw it. I didn't scream. Instead, I went to the guest bedroom, the one she always said we should turn into a gym, and I started emptying it out. Methodically. I moved out the boxes of winter clothes, the deflated air mattress, the Christmas lights that still smelled like dust and regret. Then I grabbed a suitcase. My suitcase. And I started packing, not for me to leave, but for her. Because she might have planned to vanish without warning, but now that I knew the full extent of her betrayal, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a cheating spouse. I was living with someone who had turned our entire relationship into a strategy game. And she had no idea the man she left behind could still play. It was almost midnight when I heard the key turn. I was in the living room, sitting on the far end of the couch in total silence, lights off, suitcase by the door. Not mine. Hers. I had packed it with all the calm of someone who no longer cared about fairness, only facts. And the fact was, she had planned to leave me behind like a bad chapter, so I finished the story for her. The door opened slowly. At first, she didn't notice anything. She was on the phone, whispering probably him. I couldn't make out much, just her voice, soft and careless, until she flicked on the light and saw me sitting there. She froze. The phone dropped from her hand onto the floor with a soft thud. Morris, she said, barely louder than a breath. You scared me. Didn't mean to, I said flatly. She took a step forward, then stopped when she saw the suitcase. Her eyes darted to the bedroom hallway, then back to me. What's going on? I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit there between us like a third person. The version of me who used to believe her. The man she left behind weeks ago while sleeping 2 rooms away from me. I found the letter, I said, voice calm, almost eerily so. And the spreadsheets. And the legal drafts. She blinked. Her throat tightened. Her eyes flicked toward her bag like it might offer her a quick exit. I was going to tell you, she started. When? I cut in. After the lawyer-turned-lover helped you file for a house you no longer plan to share? Morris, it's not like that. Save it, I said. You were meticulous. I'll give you that. The budgeting, the itemization, the way you kept the passwords locked down and your words locked up. You'd make a great strategist, Nadine. Shame you forgot the one variable that still mattered. She stared at me, eyes glistening now. What's that? That I stopped waiting for you to love me back. The words landed like a slap. Her expression cracked, the calm, the defensiveness, all of it slipped for a second. She tried to recover, but it was too late. The reality had already broken through her carefully rehearsed guilt script. I was unhappy, Morris, she said finally, stepping forward. You were always so small. So passive. You never pushed back. You were just there. There it was. The truth, raw and unfiltered. I know, I said quietly. I know exactly what I was. I was dependable. Predictable. I loved you without limits, and you outgrew that because you thought it made you bigger. You needed chaos to feel alive again. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean to. But you did, I interrupted. You meant to lie. You meant to build your escape plan while I was making you tea and massaging your neck after long days. You meant every second of it. So let's not insult each other with fiction now. She looked at the suitcase. You packed for me? Yes. You don't want to talk about this? Fix it. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Talk? Sure. But you don't fix a blueprint for abandonment. You don't undo a betrayal that came with a line-item budget and a lawyer on standby. That's not a marriage, Nadine. That's a transaction. Silence filled the room again, except for the low whir of the fridge and the soft tapping of her fingers against the suitcase handle. I don't have anywhere to go tonight, she whispered. You didn't plan for that? She looked up at me, as if searching for any remaining piece of the man who would offer her safety, comfort, even now. But he was gone. I had buried him hours ago, somewhere between the spreadsheet and her goodbye letter. I'll be staying at a hotel for the next week, I said, standing slowly. You have until Friday. After that, I'll be filing papers. And before you ask, yes, I already moved half our funds into a legal trust. You don't get to hollow me out financially and emotionally. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. I stepped past her, grabbed my overnight bag, and paused at the door. One last thing, I said, without looking back. The version of me who stayed up late waiting for you to come home? He deserved better. And I'm finally ready to give it to him. And with that, I walked out, not as the man she abandoned, but as the one who finally saw her for who she really was. 2 days passed like fog. I stayed in a small extended-stay hotel just off the interstate. Nothing fancy, beige curtains, scratchy towels, a microwave that sounded like it was trying to lift off, but it was mine, for now. And more importantly, it wasn't haunted. Not by the smell of her shampoo. Not by the sound of her laughing with someone else in a room I paid for. I ate cold sandwiches, stared at the ceiling, and read through emails I had ignored for years. I even rediscovered a Spotify playlist I made for her once, titled, Us Forever. I deleted it without listening. I didn't check in on her. I didn't need to. When someone spends that long preparing to disappear, they don't exactly fall apart when you beat them to it. But I still found myself wondering, not what she was doing, but what she was thinking. Whether she was angry, embarrassed, relieved. Whether she regretted getting caught, or simply regretted not finishing the plan before I ruined it. Either way, it didn't matter. I had finally stopped orbiting her feelings. Or so I thought. It wasn't until Thursday morning, when my older brother Jacob texted me, that everything twisted again. We need to talk. Now. I called him immediately. His voice was tense, not angry, not panicked, just tight, like someone holding a truth too long. Morris, look, he began. I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how. And honestly, I didn't think it was what it looked like. But now. My stomach turned cold. Now what? He exhaled. I've seen her with him. A few times. At that new bar near Silver Grove. First time I thought it was just business drinks. Second time, she told me not to mention it to you. Said she was managing a client quietly. You saw her with Dalton? I asked. Yeah, but that's not the worst part. There was a pause. I didn't put the pieces together until I saw them last weekend, and they were holding hands, Morris. Like teenagers. And she saw me. She knew I saw. She gave me this look like I wasn't supposed to care. The world stopped spinning for a second. You knew, I said quietly. And you didn't tell me. Jacob's voice broke. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe you two were separated quietly and hadn't told anyone. Or maybe she was spiraling and didn't want me in the middle. I didn't want to hurt you. You were the one person I thought I could trust. I know. I hung up before I said something unforgivable. I sat there for a long time after that, staring out the hotel window at the cracked parking lot below, watching people come and go like their lives made sense. Like they weren't being peeled apart by the people closest to them. Betrayal from your spouse stings deep, but betrayal from someone who knows your pain and says nothing? That's a different kind of poison. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the hotel room door. It was Nadine. No warning. No call. She stood there holding a folder in one hand and what looked like a box of takeout in the other, as if that was the price of admission. I found where you were staying, she said softly. I needed to talk. I didn't move aside. Why now? She didn't blink. Because you're not the only one who found something. I hesitated, then stepped back. Not because I wanted to, but because something in her voice had shifted. Not guilt, not apology, fear. She placed the takeout on the dresser and opened the folder. Inside were printed messages, screenshots, photos of Dalton with another woman, hotel invoices, private investigator reports, dates, names, timestamps. He wasn't just with me, she said, her voice low and shaking. He told me he'd left his wife years ago. He didn't. She hired a PI. I guess she's used to being lied to. I said nothing. I was stupid, she said, finally meeting my eyes. Not just for what I did to you, but for falling into someone else's trap while digging one for you. She sat down slowly, like her legs didn't quite belong to her anymore. I thought I was orchestrating my freedom. Turns out I was just someone else's distraction. I should have felt victorious. Instead, all I felt was hollow. Because now, nothing about my life was real. Not the love, not the pain, not even the betrayal. It was all just echoes of other people's games. I looked at her, disheveled, smaller than I remembered, and said the only thing that felt true. You broke us to chase someone who broke you. And for the first time since all of this began, she didn't argue. She just nodded and whispered, I know. After Nadine left the hotel that night, I didn't sleep. Not out of anger, that was long gone, but because everything finally felt still. Like my world had stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. Her final confession didn't undo what she did. It didn't make it right, but it exposed the full picture, not just of her betrayal, but of her illusion. She wasn't strong, or independent, or evolving like she'd told herself. She was just desperate not to feel invisible. And in trying to escape that feeling, she had dragged me through her undoing. But I wasn't going to stay in the wreckage with her. I woke up at sunrise and made a decision that felt as quiet as it was final. I drove back to the house one last time. Not to argue, not to talk, just to pack what was mine. I didn't want the furniture. I didn't want the couch where I used to wait for her, or the kitchen we never used together anymore. I didn't want the ghosts. Just my guitar, my old sketchbooks, a few framed photos from a version of me I didn't hate yet. She was already gone when I arrived. Her suitcase, her shoes, her lingering perfume, all gone. Only a sticky note left on the fridge. I'm sorry. I hope you find the peace I couldn't give you. No signature. She knew I'd know. I folded the note, put it in the trash without reading it again, and walked out without looking back. Not because I was done hurting, but because I was done feeding the hurt. The weeks that followed were strange. Unanchored, but not painful, not anymore. I rented a small apartment above a bookstore in a neighboring town. It smelled like old paper and freshly ground coffee, and the landlord let me repaint the walls however I wanted. I chose warm colors. Colors Nadine would have hated. I found a job teaching part-time at a local community center, creative writing. I wasn't a professional by any stretch, but the director liked my story. Not the polished version, the real one. The one with heartbreak, bad decisions, and no tidy bows. Apparently people related to that. And slowly, something started to shift. I began waking up with purpose again. Not passion, not yet, but purpose. I started running in the mornings. I adopted a rescue dog with one ear that sticks up awkwardly. I named him Marvin. I stopped checking Nadine's socials, stopped tracking old emails, stopped living in the loops I used to replay every night before bed. I even met someone. Not in the way people imagine. Not romantic. Just real. Her name was Jenna. She ran the cafe next to the bookstore. She had a laugh that didn't ask for attention and eyes that didn't scan the room looking for someone better. We talked about books, and what makes people stay, and why pain sometimes shows up wearing love's old coat. She never asked me for more than I could give, and that, somehow, gave me more than I expected. We're just friends. For now. Maybe that's all it ever needs to be. And maybe that's enough. But here's the part one never thought I'd write. The truth I didn't see coming when I stood in that cafe watching Nadine grab her phone like it was her lifeline, and I was the ghost. I'm grateful it happened. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. But the breaking. The unraveling. The raw, miserable disillusionment that forced me to face how small I had made myself just to be kept. Because from the ruins of who I thought I had to be, I built someone I finally recognize. Someone who doesn't wait for love to feel earned. Someone who doesn't measure his worth in someone else's attention span. Someone who doesn't need to be chosen to know he belongs. So if you're reading this, if you're standing in your own wreckage, Wondering what comes next, let me offer this. There is life after being forgotten. There is strength in starting over. And sometimes, the happiest ending is walking away with your head high, your heart healing, and your hands finally free.